If you're a Helldiver like me, you dropped into Oceanune, saw the sand dunes and the giant caves and ribs everywhere, and then encountered your first Hive Lord. Now, you threw everything you had at it. Absolutely everything. And it seemed to just never die, having so much health and taking up an enormous amount of time in the mission to kill. And, I mean, it just takes so long, but you keep on persevering. You keep on hitting it with everything you have. You collaborate with your teammates. You die over and over and over again, getting killed by the little ones while you're trying to focus the Hive Lord. Then a dragon roach comes and burns you to a crisp. But you keep on persevering. You go on and on and on and on. And that's just how it is for a while. The more you go, you start to see its armor crack. You start to think maybe there's hope until this happens and its armor finally breaks and you can hit it with anything you have. So now you think, finally, it'll die soon. Finally, I can take this thing out now that it's exposed to the elements. But it still goes on and on and on. Until eventually, at some point, something amazing happens. This happens.
There he is. He's
Oh. Oh, he died. I think they said him dead.
dead?
Yep, he's dead.
Oh my god. Wait, that's a, oh my god, that's a objective?
Yeah, it's like a side objective.
That takes half the mission.
Yeah.
Very worth your, it should be more XP than 200. I mean 600, but still.
Ah.
600 with super auto.
We have brought down this mighty beast.
I know, that's...
Last reload!
That's all. We died.
I mean, we can at least try to do the mission. I don't know if we can do it.
Yeah, try.
But... And with that, the Hive Lord's dead. But I'm not done. I want to make it. And I did. Here's how I did it. So to start off with, I wanted to use this foam mat because I figured it'd be easier than trying to make those armor plates out of clay. And it works out pretty well, but the mat itself is pretty big, so I cut it into smaller pieces and then kind of rolled it backwards the way it was already curving to straighten it out a little bit, make it a little bit easier to use. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and trace on the shape I want to make. Now I'm using a silver Sharpie, which barely shows up in this black, so you guys can hardly see it, but it is there, I promise. I'm just going to make this nice armor shape and then add the kind of segments to each segment. So, segmented segment, which is what I'm doing now. Once that's done, I'm going to kind of delineate in between each of the little segments. So I'm going to cut about halfway through the foam down on those lines and then at an angle cut across to give a bit of a edge there to delineate each of those pieces. Once we peel that corner out there, you can kind of start to see that it has that effect. We'll go ahead and cut the whole piece out now. And now that it's cut out, we're going to go ahead and admire it for a second. And then bend it at specific points to kind of add a hexagonal texture to it. So that's the first one there. We'll go ahead and do that 3 more times across the whole thing. Now I do like this texture, although in the end it does get a little lost. But I do like how it gives that armor plate appearance to it. And we're going to go ahead and use our razor blade to scratch and add a lot more texture to this piece. So you can see it's adding those lines. I figure this worm is going through the ground a lot, so it's probably pretty scratched up on its outer armor, and it gives a really nice texture appearance to it, especially once we add it to all the rest of them that I made. Now we're going to go ahead and make the back armor plates. Now, when I was looking at images of the Hive Lord initially, I thought it was just two kind of spiky plates, which is what I'm going to make. Seeing the Hive Lord now, it's not exactly what it looks like, but this is my Hive Lord, so I can make it look however I want, and I think it ended up looking pretty good in the end. It added a nice spiky appearance to the back of it. Go ahead and cut those out. And now that they're cut out, we're going to go ahead and cut some angles on the edges, just because these are going to be sticking up and I don't want flat edges showing. So these will kind of give more of a tapered appearance to these spikes. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and texture it up a little bit more. And then we'll take our razor blade and do the same thing we did with the front plates and scratch it to give nice texture to these armor pieces. Clean them off a bit because they've got a bunch of little pieces stuck on them. Speaking of stuck on them, we're going to be taking some super glue here to stick these two pieces together so that they're one piece. And like before, we'll go ahead and add that to the rest of them that I've already made. Now I'm going to cut out a tube, and this is going to kind of give a main body here for our Hive Lord. Drop the razor blade. This is just me measuring it out so it's the right size. And it's a bit too long. As you can see here, kind of too large. What the heck just happened there? Well, apparently the terminids stole some footage there, and the armor plates are attached to the tube now. Screw those terminids. Now we're going to go ahead and make the kind of side, I don't know, fins, I guess. I don't know what to call them. Make a ton of those. As you can see here, there should be 10 of them. And I'm just going to sort them by size so that we have similar sized ones opposite each other so that it's symmetrical. We'll go ahead, see if those are in the right place. Go ahead and texture them up. Now that they're nice and textured up, we'll get the camera to focus so we can admire it. Did it on both sides because clearly it has two sides. Yay. And we'll go ahead and start on the face. I'm going to be cutting some aluminum armature wire out, 2 equal pieces so that they're the same size. And then I'm going to spend a while twisting them together so that they are interlocked. But once I get them nice and twisted the same way, I'm going to take some thinner gauge armature wire to kind of solidify their positioning so they don't move as much as I'm working with it. Once we get the wires nice and straightened out to the way we want them, we can set that aside. Now, for this mouth, I'm going to need a bunch of teeth. So this is kind of me making a tooth, just taking a piece of clay, rolling it out so it tapers to one end and giving it a bit of a curve. Now, I do accidentally bump it, and it gets too much of curve, so I straighten it back out, which kind of wonks up the edge a bit. We'll go ahead and peel that off, straighten it out again, give it that curve, and we're going to make an absolute boatload of these. Now this is my first round of the teeth. I ended up actually making a whole nother round of these, almost twice as many as I put down here. I didn't end up using them all, but it was a lot of teeth. And you'll see some of them are a bit straighter, and that was just to add some variation so they're not all the same. We'll go ahead and bring our framing back, and we're going to wrap it up in aluminum wire to bulk out each of those mouth parts. Twist that up, it's attached, and we'll do that 3 more times on each of those. And then I wrap a piece around the middle just to kind of bulk out where the wire meets and to cover it up. Now we can start on the kind of paddle part of the mouth. This is where the teeth sit. So we want it nice and bulky. And I'm trying to use as much aluminum as I can to keep the weight down, since this is going to be hanging on top of a foam pillar. Go ahead and get some clay ready here. And get that put on our aluminum frame. Once we've shaped it out a bit, I'm kind of adding some texture with my fingers, but ultimately this ball roller tool here is going to be great at adding some inside the mouth texture. So we'll use that on the inside there, just to smooth things out, add some interesting detail. And once that's done, we're going to be ready to start putting these pre-baked teeth in. Now this first one doesn't really stay, but the majority of the rest of them are going to be sticking, and once I bake them, they're stuck in place. And as you can see, this is why I needed a lot of teeth. This is just one of 4, technically 7 mouthpieces that we do. And you can see I'm using almost a dozen teeth here. Now I'm going to take this, it's like a brush roller, and we're going to use that to add a lot of porousy texture to this. Roll that all over, and you can kind of see it's starting to add that nice texture, so it's not just the clay feel. And I kind of brush it as well to add some little scratches and striations to it, so it's not just this porousyness. Now that that's baked, we can go ahead and do the opposite side, and we'll do that for all 4 of these mouthpieces. Now we'll get a little distracted and move on to the head crown piece that's kind of above the mouth parts and joins it to the rest of the body. And that's what I'm doing with this foam here. And it's basically going to just be the exact same process as the front and back armor plates. Cut it out, fold it how we want, and then get it nice and textured up. And we've got a nice spiky crest, which is already attached to the rest of the body. And it's already starting to look really good and kind of somewhat complete, although there's a lot more work to do. Now that we've got our 4 mouthpieces here, I'm going to be approximating what I'm going to call the bunny ears of our Hive Lord. They're just more mouthpieces, but I can't unsee that being rabbit ears above them. And this is going to be the exact same process as with the front mouthpieces, wrapping aluminum around it just to bulk it out. Before adding the rabbit ear of the rabbit ears. And as you can see, I've already done it to the other side. So this is our second side here. Once I've got those framed out how I want, we're going to add some clay onto it and begin to shape this out how I want it to look. Adding a bit of corners there, tapering that end in. And then this is going to be the really big part of this piece, is adding this inside the mouth texture. So I had a nice line going down the middle before moving it off camera like an idiot, fixing it, and adding these outside, I don't know, channels, I guess you could call them, mouth channels in it. Do that to both sides before kind of framing it back in and adding our texture again with that brush. Now it felt kind of rounded, so I added a little bit of texturing to the inside so it's a little more wavy, and we'll do that twice. Now to attach this to our other mouthpiece, it's a bit of a mess. You can see kind of just a tangle of aluminum wire and aluminum foil back there. But basically I'm putting some clamps to hold it in place before covering that big old mess up with clay. Now you'll notice at the bottom there I have a long length of aluminum wire, and this was initially to attach everything to our foam frame, but this ended up not working as it didn't, for some reason the wire broke, and honestly I'm glad it did because I don't think it would have held anyway, but we got a much better solution in the end. Now when I'm covering these wires up, I kind of get this nice little mouth part looking covering over it, so I replicate that on both sides as if almost like this Hive Lord had these when it was younger and then grew out of them to grow its larger mouthpieces. And then just like with everything else, we're going to add texture so that it blends in with the rest of the clay. Now we flipped it over so that we can cover the front of these rabbit ears. Now I am going to be leaving those front wires in the front of the 4 mouth parts exposed. We will be cutting those off so that we can add our even smaller 3 smaller mouthpieces into that gap. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually using the pokey side of my smoothing tool here to add this nice trypophobia looking texture. And I think it looks really nice. And we add a lot more of that later to the front. And it looks really good. And as you can see there, I've cut, after it's baked, I've cut those wires so they're out of the way of our 3rd mouthpiece. Cover them up with a bit of clay. And then we're going to do the same thing, add that really nice trypophobia texture to the inside of the mouth there. Now I'm going to build the frame out for our 3rd mouthpiece, which is a trifecta, and it's very similar to the one with 4, it's just smaller. And just like with everything else, we're going to need to cover this with clay. So I roll the ball out before placing it to give it a nice slap. And then we'll go ahead and do that 3 times for each of the mouthpieces. Now I'm not using aluminum foil to bulk things out here because I think it's too small. I do kind of wish I did, because as you'll see many times as I'm doing this, the clay likes to push through these wires, and you can see me trying to cover it up in the back there, and it pushed through so many times, it drove me nuts. But in the end, we do eventually get it fixed and working. With that done, we'll add the mouth texture on the inside with our ball roller, before adding this kind of cone shape as the actual mouth opening. Just to give it an actual feel of a throat, even though it's not very deep. Just kind of fine-tuning things here and covering up the wire again before we can add these teeth in. Now these are different in that they are not on the inside of the mouth, but they are more on the edges, poking forward. And these are the straighter teeth as well that I made. Texture everything up with our bristle. Before plopping a lump of clay down in the middle here so that we have something to stick it to. And just like that, we're poking it on in. And just a little pressure from the ball roll here just to push it all the way into that clay bulb. Now this is the wire that broke off, but I improvised, took the handle from this basket, used an absolutely excessive amount of super glue to stick it to the back here, as you can see. But it ends up working really well and gives a lot of support to this head. It ended up being a lot bigger than I thought. I almost used 2.5 pounds of clay just for this head alone, despite all the aluminum I tried to use, so it ended up being pretty heavy. So this basket handle worked really well. Now I'm adding that head crest back on because I did have to take it off to do the handle. Just using some super glue and cutting off some pieces of our back frame there so it fits better. Now I've taken a 2x4 and this is going to add a lot of support to it so it holds it up, drilling out a hole for the end of the basket handle to sit in before positioning things just to make sure it fits, and taking some super glue and filling the entire hole and then adding our Hive Lord in. Now we're going to add our fin pieces on. Again, I don't know what to call these. And as I'm doing this, I'm kind of cutting them down so they fit better, look better, and also keeping our pairs matched up so that they're even on either side. Now with that done, we can't just leave a Hive Lord free roaming. We need a Helldiver to conquer it. And this Helldiver is going to be absolutely tiny. This has definitely pushed my skills that I'm only just starting to make in this. But I think it turned out really well. Just positioning the arms and legs there. And once I'm finally happy with the length and sizing and positioning of everything, we'll go ahead and start slamming some clay onto this tiny little body. Go ahead and add the arms and the legs there. And now we can start working on the armor, cutting out the chest plate here. And I kind of test fit it before realizing I need to add his tunic shirt. I don't know what, it just kind of looks like a tunic at the bottom there. It isn't quite long enough, so I have to stretch it a little bit more. But once I do that, I can fit it on there. Now that that's on, we can add our chest plate. And kind of get our tunic looking a little less attached to the legs and free flowing. Now I've added some of the shoulder pads on, and now I'm adding the knee armor. And this is shaping out for his magnificent cape. Once I get it stretched to the length and thickness I want, we'll use a razor blade to get nice smooth edges on each side before cutting out a divot to go over the shoulders. And then we'll go ahead and position that cape how I want it. I did use a piece of aluminum foil to hold it in position while it was in the oven baking so that it didn't flop to a position I didn't want it at. Now this is where it really gets hard. I'm making his tiny little head, and I'm just going to kind of carve out the shape of his visor here to make it look like he even has one. I did many attempts before this, and this was the best I found to work for it. And then we're going to add the kind of head panel on top of his helmet here. I added the ventilators on the side of his helmet before giving it just a little bit of texture on the front. Nice and blurrily because my camera won't focus. And to me, it looks absolutely incredible considering it's the first time ever making a mini. Now we'll go ahead and press it onto the body. You can see I used a dab of clay there for a neck for shaping it out. And then we'll go ahead and do the pre-making of the Super Earth flag here. Now I've already gone ahead and done a base coat of a nice dark black gray on the Hive Lord, but we're going to paint the teeth here with a white color to start before darkening them up and dirtying them up with a brown wash. We'll go ahead and do a nice dry brushing of dark gray over the entire thing. And this will really highlight all of the details I intentionally and unintentionally added to this. Now back to our Helldiver here. We're going to start with just a black coating over the whole thing, since his armor is mostly black. And once that's dried, I'm going to use my very non-mini skill here to add the yellow details. Now, unfortunately, I think the paint I was using for these yellow stripes was kind of terrible, and it doesn't stick very well, but I do my best to get it looking nice. Do it on the shoulder pads, the edge of the tunic, edge of the breastplate, do the edge of the cape before trying to add the skull on the back of his cape. Now, my first attempt doesn't go spectacularly, but the second one I think looks really good, especially for the scale. Now, I know that there are plenty of artists out there who could do way better with this scale, but for me, this is my first time, almost my first time painting, let alone painting tiny little figures at this size. It's hard to tell, but this Helldiver is about the size of a quarter. And this is where the skull turns out way better. It's actually at least somewhat recognizable as a skull. And like, it's not great, but it's there. I can tell what it is, so that's enough for me. Now, this is the part where I shut my mouth and we listen to the Super Earth Anthem as I paint the Super Earth flag.